looking over my shoulder. But we're going to officially kick today's mastermind off. And I want you guys to put in the chat, what is your least favorite Thanksgiving food? Put that in. We usually ask people like, where are you tuning in from? But we have Thanksgiving in 2 weeks. So I'm not a huge Thanksgiving food person. My plate is like pathetic. But drop in the chat, what's your least favorite item? And Tyler, I'll go ahead and ask you while people are
Stuffing.
tuning in.
Stuffing is terrible. I do not
Stuffing.
understand stuffing. Yeah.
Doesn't the North does stuffing, but the South does dressing, I believe.
Oh, okay. Is it the
Yeah.
same
So,
thing or is it different?
it's a little bit different. Texture is a little bit
Oh, yeah.
different. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, guys. Well, it is Friday the 15th. We are halfway through the month, and I am super excited to interview Tyler today. Tyler, I don't know, have you ever been on the Mortgage Coach channel on a
Yeah,
Friday
it's been
master?
a long
Oh,
time,
okay.
but yeah, I've talked with Dave before. Dave's like the first guy that ever interviewed me, like in a public
Really?
forum. Oh yeah.
Well, you've been on many stages here lately, just from what I've seen, and you're one of those that is willing to share. You come from an abundant mindset and you make things
Yeah.
really simple to understand. So I thought, what better guest to have on with me today than another weirdo like you? No, I'm just kidding. A little weird, right? A little
No,
weird.
I'm rolling with that. Yeah, for sure.
But for those who may like not know you or haven't seen you on stage, give us a little bit of an intro of when did you get into the business? What does your business look like now? Do you have a massive team that helps you with production? Is it just you? So give us some of that insight so we all have context of your story.
Yeah. So I'm in Des Moines, Iowa. And my business serves only Iowa. That's the only area I serve. I've been in the mortgage business for 21 years, started when I was 19,
I was going to say,
moved
what?
around. Yeah, yeah. So I'm 40. When I got started, I really didn't know anything, like probably a lot of us. I moved around a lot in different companies for the first few years. It was like I repeated my first year over and over. I started going to events and learning from stuff like this, which, by the way, like what an amazing time to be alive that we have access to this from the comfort of our own home and office. Back, when I was on my start, it was like you had to fly somewhere to go to an event, stay at a hotel. Like there wasn't free and easy content. So my hope is, people still implement stuff even though they're not paying to be there. But that changed my life when I started going to events like that. That's when I met Dave originally. And I got really lucky where I had a lot of time to interview a lot of places. When I decided I needed to pick more of a permanent home to originate from. And that's how I ended up at Fairway. After interviewing over 30 companies, they gave me an opportunity to run a P&L when I was 24, which I think was a big risk to take on me. Um, and I've been at Fairway ever since. So
Since you were
my
24, you've been at Fairway?
yeah, been here for 15
Wow,
years. Yeah.
that's
So a little over
rare.
15. Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
Great
I, I
job.
like to say I choose slowly, but I choose well. My
Mm.
wife could back me up on that claim. Um, but I really love the business. I fell in love with marketing and systems. A big influence of mine has been back in the day, the Loan Toolbox, which is Tim Brahim, along with a lot of what Dave's taught. So today, my team is all here, in Iowa. We've got myself and four others that support my product. I don't know how to describe that, but I'm the only
Mhm.
one that's bringing in volume. I guess
Okay.
that's probably the easiest way to
You bring
describe
in
it.
the business and they help
Yeah. Yeah. Like
manufacture
I
product.
couldn't do it without them, but they also wouldn't have loans to work if it weren't for my efforts, I guess. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. My something that's really important to me is delivering an amazing experience for clients. It's not about being the cheapest, right? Because if you know anything about Iowa, which most people don't, most people get us confused with other states. Um, but in Iowa, we're like filled with credit unions and banks everywhere. And there's really great people that work at those places. But the challenge is a bank and credit union's model is just to be the cheapest possible. And it's like this race to the bottom. And candidly, like there is no competing with someone who doesn't have to pay taxes. It's just not possible when you're trying to
Mhm.
compete on cost. So we've had to get really good over the years at creating a really consistent experience that delivers really great results for clients. And been really fortunate to build a business that operates that way. And I think that's kind of what we're going to talk about a little bit today.
It is. Today we're talking about how to win business on reputation over price. And from the little bit of research that I had done, I'd seen that you were a producing branch manager, which I sometimes refer to as the shit sandwich because it is such a difficult position when you're trying to produce and you're managing. So that's just, the dev term that I use for that. So
I I
yes,
love shit sandwiches then because
shit
I
sandwich.
love this
Yep.
model. Yeah.
But you have over 1,200 five-star reviews, and you also stated that you generate at least an average of 3 inbound leads a week. So let's
Yeah.
kind of break this down into, if it were quarters of a football game. We're going to make like
Yeah.
a playbook that's easy for people to take what you've done, and even if they're a solo team, like it's just them, or if they do have a team or an army behind them, what are some things that you do that you think would be beneficial if we shared today for someone else to then start seeing some of the success? Because we're going into, the winter. It tends
Yeah.
to slow down a little bit.
Depending on where you're at. Yeah.
Right. And, people are struggling still. I have I do discovery calls every day, and I hear on repeat either between the things that have always worked aren't working, and I'm doing the social, I'm doing the webinars, I'm doing events, and they're kind of stuck. So I'm hoping to bring some hope and some
Yeah.
light today, and I'll let you talk to us about how we can do that.
For sure. Well, so first off, for context, for me, I started getting reviews probably like 16 years ago, which was early. Like a lot of people hadn't started trying that yet. And I always try to be really transparent in why I did that because I think that it's relatable. So the thing that always bugged me about going to these events is you'd see people on stage who are putting up crazy numbers and be like, that's cool for them. No fucking way am
Yeah.
I going to do that.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's just really irritating. So I
Or
want
you
you to
bring, like,
know,
you're there. I remember when I was watching these calls, and the
uh,
Jeremy Fortiers and Dan Keller, and I'm like, but you have this army behind you. Like, what are the little
yeah.
guys who don't have the deep pockets to spend
Well, and,
so sometimes you can feel like it's so out of reach.
and
That's what I
tell
love
me the
about you.
progression that you got there, like make it relatable. So,
Right.
first off, you said team, and I think it's kind of a funny story of mine is I remember I came back from a Lone Toolbox event. Tim's a big mentor of mine, and I'm now a faculty member on the Atlas. So like we've gotten close. When I left that event, I came home and I named myself the Tyler Osby team before I had anyone. Um, It was just me. I bought the domain. I started putting in my email title. So like just know that it's never too soon to like take on an identity that you're
Mm.
growing into. But also maybe try not to have such a big ego that you name it off of yourself because that's like one of my biggest mistakes is now people just want to talk to Tyler and oftentimes my team is way more talented at a lot of things than I am. Um, so anyway, that out of the way. My ego was the reason why I started going after reviews, but not the way you might think. I remember looking at the ranking, like of who did what in terms of like volume in our market. And at the time, I was doing like 4 units a month, which is really good. I mean, anybody who can throw 4 units up consistently, I think, is a really great producer. Um, but I'm fighting against these people who are doing like 15 and 20 units a month, and I'm like, what are these people doing? This is insane. And they worked at places like I described, like credit unions, right? And again, good people, different model, but like their clients aren't raving fans at the end. Like they're just happy that they closed, they got a good deal. But there was not a lot of communication. The experience wasn't great. So I hated the fact that we were on the same scoreboard, but yet like it
Mm.
was a completely different experience. So I was at a coaching event with Dan Sullivan. If you know Dan Sullivan,
Yes.
strategic
Yep.
coach, he's been a huge influence on my life. But he made a comment in a coaching event where he said, "You shouldn't be playing games you can't win." And that stuck with
Mm.
me because that was a game at the time that I wasn't ready to win, but I needed to pick a different scoreboard if I was going to win it. And there wasn't really anything else out there. So me being like really selfish decided to create my own, and that was reviews. So I became extremely intentional about driving, people to leave me reviews, and I can share the campaign that I used.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But it was hugely impactful. I went from like 20 reviews at the time, and they were all 5 stars, to like 85 reviews in just a few weeks.
Mm,
And it's just been a compounding effect since then. But initially, it was just to be really vulnerable, like protect my own confidence, I think, because I
mm,
was in this room where I'm competing against people who are doing way bigger numbers than I was. But, I'm sure there's people listening that are like, I know I do a better job than these people who outproduce me, and there's nothing
yeah,
more irritating than to be compared against somebody who, just isn't really doing that good of a job. Um,
right.
so I think reviews are really great that way. But what it's turned into today is it's my best referral source, like for
Mm,
new business. And a lot of people love getting referral sources like real estate agents. I still definitely cater my business to taking great care of realtor referral partners. But the reality is I kind of wake up in a cold sweat wondering if they're going to go have coffee or lunch with another lender, right?
right.
Like there's
Very
always
true.
this risk that they could cheat on
Mm,
you.
right.
Um, my reviews never cheat on me. Like they're always there. They continue to compound. It's like the
Wow.
closest thing to an annuity in this business that I've ever
Mm,
found.
that
Um,
is very true. I've never heard it
yeah.
worded that way. So where do you get the reviews? Like, is it just on Google? Do you use Zillow? Do you experience.com? Like, help us break down that initial campaign of yours of when are you asking for
Yeah.
the review? Let's start there.
Yeah. So for me, there's two different like kind of options you can go after. The biggest opportunity we all have is our client that we've already helped close on homes with. No matter whether it's 10 people or hundreds of people, that's your biggest opportunity to get a lot of reviews very quickly. So I would think of it as, okay, I want to go after that, and then I want to craft like into my own personal perfect loan process. How do I want to ask for reviews throughout the process of getting a loan? Um, I can share the thing that I did. Do you want me to share my screen really quickly and see if,
Yeah.
if this goes up? Hopefully this
You know what
works.
I think the challenge is this causes us to level up. Like you have to
Yeah.
provide world-class service to
So
earn
what
the,
this is just the campaign. I don't know if you got a
yeah,
computer screen, you can just scan it or
here.
whatever,
Yeah.
or screenshot it and scan it later. But this is the step-by-step campaign that I did for past
Ooh,
clients. It's inside the loan atlas. That's how this came
okay.
about.
So guys,
Um,
those of you who are listening either on Facebook or via Zoom, don't forget to put your questions in the chat and we're going to make this mastermind style, but Tyler has gifted us this QR code on the screen. So make sure you
and
scan
I'll
that. And so if I put in my
thanks,
information
Sean.
here, it will let me download. I see.
Yep,
Okay.
it'll email it to you. I'll put it
Perfect.
in the chat for anybody that's on Zoom. But anyway,
Okay.
my point with sharing it. So that was with all of my clients that I had already worked with. Now, a lot of people have experience.com, right?
Mhm.
And have tons of reviews on experience.com. It's a great service, but no client is going to experience.com to look at what people are saying about their loan officers. Like it'll come up on a Google search when they Google you, but when they Google mortgage in Dallas, Texas, for example, they're not going to find you, right? That's not really the intention of what experience.com is. So I, over the years, have tried accumulating reviews in a lot of different places. I've tried Yelp, I've tried Zillow, I've tried, um, like there were some other companies that had even spooled up, like Rene Rodriguez had one for a while. Um, I accumulated reviews in all the places and I paid attention to where leads came from. For a while, I was getting some decent traction with Zillow, but then anybody that has ever done that
Mhm.
now knows Zillow got into the mortgage business and they started taking all their own leads. So for me, I now only send people to Google. So to do it on Google, you just need to go to the Google My Business page and create a profile, and then you can accumulate reviews there. So um, anyway, I think I just put the wrong link. Hold on one second. I'm gonna update that. So
Heather's
see if
helping you
that one
out here.
works. Yeah, my wife who runs the marketing for the Loan Atlas just sent me the right link.
Thank you,
Um,
Heather.
thanks, wife. So
So
anyway, the
if you were the LO who has regardless how many past clients,
Yeah.
would you send this out? And I'm sure it's in your campaign sequence here, but
But I'll describe it. Yeah.
okay. Yes, go ahead.
Well, so the first thing is you have to organize your list. Like,
Yeah.
hopefully you have a database, but if you don't, like, this is your opportunity to create it, right? So something as simple as first name, last name, email, phone number, and while you're at it, get their property address, mailing address, and all that. And birthdays is good to have too, right? But what I recommend doing is if you use experience.com, create a new column where you can put the experience.com review they've already left you, because your
Mm,
follow-up can be slightly modified where you're saying, hey, I'm just trying to get some, reviews out online. It really helps people find us. If you'd be willing to help us out, here's the way to do it. But then you can even say, I'll make it super easy on you. Just copy and paste the great thing you already wrote that nobody's seeing,
mm,
and people can just copy and paste it. But the way I put it together was like a multi-step sequence of some calls, emails, and just continuing to stay in touch with those people. I find that like you'll get a decent chunk on the first ask, and then like you get a better chunk after three touch points or
mm,
more. But we've seen a lot of people inside the Loan Atlas do this campaign and have tons of success with it. In fact, more recently, if you get too many reviews too quickly, Google will
mhm,
actually like apparently mark your account as suspicious and like
mhm,
stop showing the reviews for a little while. We've seen that happen now. So you might do this like in chunks, like 25 or 50 clients at a time, depending on how big your past client database is. But ultimately, like as we go into the winter season and some of us find ourselves with more time, it's a great time to get on the phone and talk to people anyway, right? So this is just another thing that you can add to why you're calling them. Um, and again, if they do it, it's hugely helpful. I mean, for me, in terms of results, just in my mortgage practice, we track everything, like
mm.
like we always kind of tell everybody to do. As far as leads coming into our office, we get an average of 3 per week that strictly come from reviews,
And is
which
that
is
because they're on
phenomenal.
Google and they're typing in like Iowa mortgage? And because of
Yeah.
the way your reviews are structured, for those of you who are tuning in, if you, not that you should ever script your clients, but if you can get them to use certain keywords that are search engine optimized, like the location of where you are, lender, mortgage, that helps for you to appear whenever they go in and they type in like, best lender
Yeah.
around me,
Well, and your Google business is specifically geolocated wherever you're at. So
Mhm.
if someone within, I think, 45 miles of me searches for mortgage, they don't even have to say Des Moines.
Mm.
It will pop up. So the example I give, which immediately ages me, but growing up, we used the yellow pages. You remember the yellow pages, the phone
I don't
book?
think okay, I'm 41 and I don't think I ever
I'm
used the,
40. Stop it. Come
okay,
on.
well,
Well, there was this thing called the phone book that we would get every
yes,
year, and it was hilarious. It's what you'd use to find businesses. And people would pay really great money. Seeing the laughs in the chat, this is amazing.
yeah,
The 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 ad would be like, that's your
yeah,
shot, right? Like when people
right.
look up mortgage, you got to have a great ad in the yellow pages. Well,
And you
nobody
make sure
uses
it's
phone
like
books
A
anymore.
plus plus so that you're at the
Yeah,
very
yeah.
top.
You name your business so you're at the top. It's ridiculous. So now the new yellow pages is when you Google a business, or not a business, but if you Google a type of service provider, you'll notice there's like the search results in the left, and then off to the right, there's what I think a lot of us affectionately call like the 3-pack, where it
Mm.
lists 3 local businesses with names, phone numbers, but also the review count and like the average star rating. And if you've got a much higher star rating than your peers, they're going to click and look at more about you. So for me, when these opportunities come in, I'm not making it up. Like when these calls come in, these people are probably better clients to us than someone who's referred by like one of our best past clients, because they've already read the reviews, they did their research, they feel good about it. That's the nice thing about how those inbound calls come. Sometimes they even apply before I get a chance to talk to them, which shows you the power of having a really great
Wow.
review presence. I mean, people giving you
Wow.
social security numbers and stuff. It's easy. So
Would you say that, because I believe the word of mouth referral nowadays is just not enough. I think because of COVID and the amount of screen time and the ways that we can verify, like it's, you trust but verify. Even if it's your mom that's giving you a recommendation, you're like, still just going to go online and just look at the
Yeah.
reviews, maybe look at some pictures, maybe then go to social. I'm going to scroll for a couple feet. I'm judging you. Like I'm seeing, is this guy crazy? Which, by the way,
Yeah.
your bio is awesome on Instagram. I love how it's not, the norm, which maybe we'll get into at the end. But,
Yeah.
people are looking for things to validate. Okay, do I feel safe? Does he seem
Yeah.
like an expert? Does he seem like he will care about my interest and what's best for me? And then once they've made that decision, and it's an invisible metric that you can't measure because it's behavioral, but once they've made the decision, like, okay, based on everything that I'm seeing in all of these reviews, Tyler's my guy. I'm going to contact him or I'm going to go ahead and apply. You're usually not being shopped on rate at that point because they've made the decision, assuming you
No.
don't screw up like the first consultation and the follow-up. But would you say, like, what percentage of those people even consider shopping you at that point?
So if they're a shopper, they present themselves as a shopper the second they call in. They say, "Hey, I'm calling several people, and I got your name online. What's your best rate?" And immediately, I know that that's like not going to be a winning deal, right? But if there was a stat that I shared in my recent presentation, I don't remember right offhand, but I want to say um, the CFPB said about 80% of people research the lender before they ever call them. And
Mm-hmm.
that stat was really, it was great to see. I've never seen a CFPB provide any kind of statistics, but that was interesting. But it helped reinforce like, oh, this is a really great idea to show up in a way that like people can feel great about calling me before they ever do. And when you have a really great online presence, which is not complicated to do for anybody watching, um, it's an opportunity for you to stack the deck when you know you're in competition with other lenders. So like sometimes we'll get the comment from a real estate agent. They're scripting around this. Frankly, I've never found the right script that works. But hey, I got to give 3 names, right? Okay. Well, if you're going to give 3 names, tell me more about how you make that introduction. Well, I just put it in an email or I hand out business cards or whatever. Okay. So the thing that I've started doing is saying, okay, let's find a way to work in like the reviews into this so it makes it easier for people to see who we are, what we do. So when I had an agent tell me that they were just sending websites, well, I changed up my website a lot. Like if you go to applywithtyler.com, it's plastered with reviews. Like there's tons of social proof
I noticed
of
that.
who we are
Yeah.
and what we do, right? When I found out people were giving out business cards still, which was shocking to me, but they do because I've had clients actually say, "I'm holding your card here, and this is why I'm calling you." I started putting a screenshot or whatever you would call it on my business card of the review count. So there's
Mhm.
social proof that like this person knows what they're doing. Because otherwise, like it's whoever has the best headshot gets the call, right? Or I don't know what it is. It's not an easy choice, but if you make the reviews really easy to see the social proof, like it's just a really simple call. So you just got to play the game that not everybody knows is being played, I guess. And sometimes you got to set it
Yeah.
up that way.
I love that this started with, changing the scoreboard and you
Yeah.
looked for, a game that you could win and decided to make your competitive advantage a metric that most weren't even tracking, let alone focusing on. And I will say that is my love-hate whenever we do interviews like this and we'll ask people about their production and how many families will you serve this year. And for some of the numbers, I'm like, yeah, but how many of those did you have to ask for pricing exceptions? Like how many of those were actually profitable? Because some will
Mhm.
pay 10 grand a month for an MSA that gets them X amount of closings that then those closings just made it like where they're at a break even. So it's like, not everything is what we assume that it is. And to me, one of the
Yeah.
greatest measurements of success of your clients is how happy are they? And how else do you measure that if you aren't doing the reviews? But, that
Right.
does then require that you do have proactive communication. And maybe it's not a race to the bottom where you're just pitching, lowest rate. And if you have the lowest rate, maybe that is what you can pitch. And so you don't have to maybe have the same level of world-class referrals and experiences for your clients. I think it's a lot harder that way. To me, it's easier to
Yeah.
just build this, like what you said, annuity of income off
Mhm.
reputation, that it's repeatable. And at the end of the day, guys, people go online, and when they're scrolling, the thing that they're thinking of is, have you helped someone like me, whatever that like me is? I could be a first-time home buyer, I could be an investor, I could be a downsizer. And have you helped someone like me recently? That's what I want to know. Because if your last post is from a closing in 2019, then I'm
Not a
creating a
good sign.
story in my head that's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, maybe he got out of the business. And it's like, why risk that? Why leave it to that narrative gap and let them fill the story when you could fill it if we just created a systematic process for capturing these? So I know there was a question in the chat about, do you know if you have reviews on experience.com and it's tied to your employer, is there any way to get them transferred to Google?
So I wish it was a turnkey solution, but it's not.
Yeah.
So Experience.com is its own proprietary website where they're collecting information. And I think it's useful to understand why companies use it. So I'll give you the quick abbreviated version. There's interpretation that the CFPB wants you to have something in place to handle any complaints that come in. And Experience.com is a really good chance to know if you got a happy client or pissed off client right at closing. So for your employer, it gives them the opportunity to do that. And then it gives them what's called a net promoter score, NPS. That's why they score you 0 to 10 or 1 to 10, which I hate, because when you get anything less than a 10, it screws up your average rating when the experience.com rating comes in.
We're so competitive.
The struggle is real. Like anybody that has it is pissed off about it. That being said, I personally think it's really important that you have your own review getting strategy in place for something where clients will, potentially find you. And then additionally, be able to, turn those into opportunities and phone calls. Because with experience.com, again, like it's a cool service, but it doesn't serve that purpose. So the only way you can go about doing that is if you put into place a strategy where you're immediately following up with people when they leave an experience.com review and having them posted on Google. There's some process things you could do, like in your own perfect loan process of how you handle your business, that I could give some tips on. And if we get there, maybe we talk about that.
Yes.
It's up to you.
Yes, because so far we've talked about a strategy that people could implement right away with capturing reviews. It sounds like for those who only were using experience.com, you may need to alter your process a little bit. And
It's
if I
that
had to, so do you think people will, because to me, I'm like, so you want me to leave a Google review, you want me to leave a Facebook review, you want me to go, like there's so many different places that a lot of LOs will send people because they want reviews on like Yelp and, all of them.
Mhm.
To me, that's too much. Like you risk that being the reason, like the overwhelmment of like, if I just had to leave one, then I would. And most people, if you look, I don't remember the stats offhand, but when you look at how many people are willing to leave reviews and they go all the way to the review page and then they stop because they don't know what to say. Like they overthink it and they're like, oh, I'll just get back.
Yeah.
I'll do it later. So the fact that another pro tip is like, if you have their reviews and maybe it's already on experience.com and you're going back, like copy and paste it and make it as easy for them as possible. Or if you're even speaking to them, you're like, okay, I'm going to write this up and send it to you. Do you mind posting that as a review for me? Because the easier and the least amount of friction possible, where they don't have to think at a time when most are time poor because they're juggling a move, then you even have a higher chance of them completing that task. And it's not that they don't want to or don't think you've earned it, but a lot of times they just don't, they have to think too hard of what to write. So great
Right.
tip
Well,
on
or they
that.
think they left you. They think they left you the review. I mean,
Yeah.
for a long time, I fought against the corporateexperience.com review. So I could definitely share, my past experiences on that. But just getting the review first is key. And if you're doing the strategy where you're going after past clients, if we're talking about like, structuring that as like putting your database in an order of like who you go after first, as marketers, we call that segmentation, right? Your first segment that you go after would be the people who've already left you in experience.com reviews. Those are your easiest people, the lowest hanging fruit. Those are the first calls I would make. And then once you've maximized that group, then move on to the people who didn't leave you a review. And I'll add this because, first of all, we all have clients that, maybe we made a mistake and the experience wasn't as good as we want it to be, or we don't really know what their experience was like and we don't trust that it would be a great review. This is your choice on who you're going to follow up with. So if you have some
Mm.
clients that you don't think are worthy of reaching out, delete those before you implement this strategy. Because one thing I've noticed over doing this for a long time with other people is it's effective. So like these people will leave reviews. You need to make sure that you're, filtering out anybody you don't want to have write a review. But once you get to a certain point where you've got a lot of really positive reviews, don't be afraid of a negative review either. Because I think that that makes you human and it gives you an
Mhm.
opportunity to show a lot of character in how you respond to a negative review.
Right. Okay, well, let's dive into your perfect loan process to get, because you said there were two options. One is going after the clients that have already
Clients that you've
closed with
already
you, and
helped.
then
Mhm.
there's, yes, yep. So let's break that down with how you optimize the process and then when you're asking for the review.
You bet. So, first off, if you're doing a good job of sharing success stories from clients that you've already helped by sharing their reviews, it's not going to be a surprise that you're a person that really, loves getting reviews, right? Like, nobody I've ever asked for a review is ever like, "Oh, I didn't know that you did reviews." They've had plenty of
When
opportunities to see it,
everything is
right?
like structured from the get-go of like,
Yeah,
look at all my
yeah.
reviews. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a part of our sales process, right? Like our perfect loan process and encapsulates reviews as a core part of that. So for me, I think it's really important that you structure early in conversations that reviews are something that you really value and look forward to earning. The way that I have found most successful, and there's a lot of ways you can do this, so I'm just going to share what's worked for me, is when we do our consultation when clients go under contract. That's a live call or virtual meeting or in-person meeting. I will ask the client, hey, before we get started, I just want to get a sense of like what would make this a great experience for you. And if they've bought a house before, I ask them what they loved about the lender that they worked with, if it wasn't me, and what they would change, because that gives me a lot of insight. And I hear them and I repeat it back, not saying it verbatim, but just making sure they know that they were heard. And then I say, is there anything else that I should know that like we need to be doing to really knock it out of the park for you? Sometimes people mention things that like surprise me, like,
Like what?
um, you know, I've had people say like, I don't want my loan to get sold. And then I will
Oh,
become aware that I will never use the word "your loan was sold" in any future conversations with that client, right? I'll explain to them what transferring of a servicer is, and I'll probably just mark that loan with Fairway. I have the ability to mark it as retained servicing, so I don't have to have that combo. But these are the kinds of things that, like, if I can avoid the problem later on, why not just address it right up front, right? But there's a lot of examples that could come up and just listen, pay attention, and then that gives me an opportunity to tell them exactly what to expect from me. So okay, from this point forward, every Friday you're going to be getting a weekly update from our team. If you do update calls on this day, you're going to be getting update calls from my team. A few days before closing, you're going to phone call going over all the final numbers, so there's no surprises for closing. And then the day of closing, this is what's going to happen, and this is how you're going to bring in your money. We just set all that up front, and then we say, do you have any questions, or is that falling short at all of your expectations? And as soon as I get like full commitment and buy-in that I understand what a five-star experience looks like for them, and they understand what we're going to deliver, that's when I ask, hey, and I have a favor to ask. Once we get you to closing, would you be willing to share your experience with an honest review? And I gain like a verbal contract in that, lock call or whatever. And then at that point moving forward, we know we're on, right? And then usually halfway between when we get the deal disclosed, which is like that lock call, and when we close, we do a check-in. And the check-in is, hey, I just wanted to let you know, like the appraisal came in, or we got our clear to close, or whatever. I just want to check in. How are things going? How are we doing for you? Right? And that gives them a chance to raise any concerns. And I had a client raise a concern about 3 weeks ago on a deal where the condo had trouble with getting a warranty, if anybody's dealt with that, and a
mm,
lot of insurance issues that came up, and he was pissed. And right, frankly, rightfully so. There were some things that we probably should have done differently in that communication as well. So I let him feel heard. I resolved it, and I said, "Hey, this isn't going great, but I want to make sure it's a great experience. He's actually a repeat client, but I want to ask a favor. So here's framing up how to get a review out of a negative experience. When we close, I'm still going to ask you to write that review I talked about, that first call, but you didn't have a great experience. And my goal is to make sure that we can earn at least a 4-star review with an honest review of how this went." He's like, "Totally, dude. Like, I'm in." So if you look up the recent reviews for me, there's a guy that just wrote a 4-star review. It could have been a 1-star review if he would have wrote it in the heat of that moment, or if I wouldn't have resolved it, which, trust me, there's plenty of experiences in 21 years where I could tell stories where it went that way. Um, and that's, an opportunity to check in, but still get the review, right? And then pre-close, that's when we start asking for the review. And then I have a follow-up sequence of being at closing and asking almost all the time, or a day of closing, post-closing call. And then there's several touch points through email after that with follow-ups. And actually, through some feedback from Denise, I think I'm going to start doing post-closing calls, like a week out, and then I think 30 days out. And I'll work the review asking into those conversations.
So I've always wondered, so first of all, thank you for sharing that. And guys, if you have more questions on his perfect loan process and when he's asking for the review, feel free to put that in the chat. I was curious how many times, because not every loan goes smoothly. And sometimes it's out of
Yeah,
your control. And sometimes it's people that it doesn't matter what you do, they're going to be unhappy about something. So I was
right.
curious how you overcome those obstacles, but it sounds like you just address it head on. And
Yeah.
so biggest takeaway so far, guys, is one, do you have a perfect loan process where you've clearly identified the touch points? So like Tyler shared, he set that expectation at the time of, the contract was executed, which I'm assuming is the same time you're talking about rates and locking the rate.
Mhm.
So setting that expectation, but you also were very strategic with the question you asked, where you said, what does a 5-star level service look like to you? So I love that we don't assume that everyone's 5-star experience looks and feels the same, because it may not. And that's a great question to start interjecting somewhere in your perfect loan process to get tailored results and tailored experiences, which what a great metric to measure yourself on. Like instead of
Yeah.
how many loans am I doing every month, it's like, what's the ratio, guys, of how many families do you serve and what percentage of those are leaving 5-star reviews? That would be
Yeah.
an interesting metric on just that conversion. But something recently that I've been pushing my clients really hard on, and it's probably why you heard it recently, is why do we not set up the 2-week post-closing? Like, I mean, when you're going over the final CD and it's before, the day or a couple days before closing, not every loan officer can go to the closings. And sometimes it's because it's, nationwide or whatnot. But why not schedule that 2-week post-closing call? Because I would always tell clients, it's kind of like your wedding day. It's a blur, like you're signing and dating all these things, but you really can't remember what's going on. And then you're like, wait, where do I send my first payment to? So if you pre-schedule that call, and I even like pre-scheduling, like putting it on the calendar with Zoom, even your annual review calls for like the first 5 years. That way it's already set. You're not chasing people. But if you did that call via Zoom, and then you asked basically kind of like interview questions, not like you're interrogating, but asking them to share their story and then their permission to share that on social media, where you're creating
Mm.
user-generated content where people can feel, it's like this conviction where you feel someone who recently was downsizing, who was a senior, who was worried about, selling the family home. And instead of you always telling the story and having to be the content creator, the best marketing strategy would be having your clients who then tag you as a collaborator, and they're sharing their story through you as the message.
That's a really cool idea.
Mhm.
So just I'm gonna say I'm gonna kind of take the air out of the tire a little bit for somebody who's like that. I would never do that, Deb. So I will tell you, you will be shocked how often people are totally cool with doing exactly what you're saying, um, but they're terrified to do it. Um, and frankly, I think I've kind of had this limiting belief that they're going to think I'm weird. Like if I ask them
Mhm.
to do certain things, um, not to say that you're weird, we're just weird together.
Oh, I'm weird for
The
sure.
yeah, I think that, you know, if you ask 5 people to do that and you get 1 out of 5, you're gonna look amazing to that one, to that audience that you share that one person story with. So don't sleep on that suggestion. That's a really, I
And
mean,
for some
they might
people,
be on
like
this
their day,
call.
yeah,
Go ahead.
their day job may be a teacher, but they're like micro influencers as a side hustle, as on TikTok. And how I used to do this back in the day, I mean, we're talking over 10 years ago. I would ask clients like, hey, we don't ever get to see the home that you get to buy. But I knew from having conversations with them, and I was one of those that like I loved going deep with clients. Like that was my thing. Denise was great at having the high level conversation. She hated the warm and fuzzies. I was all about the warm and fuzzies. So I would get almost everything but their like blood type. And if I knew they were a first time home buyer and they were wanting to buy a home because they have a dog, which is a big motivator for a lot of people, I would just ask like, hey, do you mind, like, could you take a video of like that moment that you walk into your house for the first time and your dog's running through that backyard and he's wagging that little tail and sniffing every fence post and peeing on every blade of grass? Like, could you capture that for us and just send it to me or post it online and tag me? Because those are the generational memories. That's the like emotional heartstring side. I know we talk a lot about generational wealth, which for some that may not be a motivator. Like they're thinking, where's my nursery gonna be, and where am I gonna set my Christmas tree for the first time? So it's like, don't be too fearful to ask certain things that is allowing them to share from a contribution standpoint. I think no matter, I mean, we're all humans, and I know this truth that we like to contribute to something greater than just, ourselves. And if you allow them to share their struggles, like what were your concerns? What were your fears? How did you find me? Like, how did you get over that, thought of like, okay, so I'm downsizing, but my payment's not really it's not going down. Like, is this a smart move? Like, let's just have you share your story so that someone else who's like you could benefit and have hope or know who to contact if they're in a similar situation. And so people love to come from that place of contribution, and it feels good to share.
I want to piggyback what you're saying. So I say it like I haven't done it before, but I totally do what you're describing, but I ask them to do it in the review. So
Mm-hmm.
like if I had a client recently, we helped her post divorce. We do a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a weird niche, right? That we participate in. And I remember when we started the conversation, so it was even before she bought the house. Sometimes you're vibing with people, right? You're like, this is really
Mm-hmm.
good. We like each other. This is good. So that's when I go, right? Like I'm just going to keep riding this slope and see where it goes. So with Kelly, I was like, Kelly, when we get you across the finish line and we get you into this house and get you this fresh start that I know you want so bad because you're living with your ex-husband right now, would you be willing to write a review? Because like people don't often share their story that they were, in a divorce situation specifically, right? And if someone else is reading my reviews and they see your story, they might feel the confidence to finally pick up the phone and talk to somebody, because Kelly hadn't talked to anybody about this and she really needed to for a long time. And at that point, I was like, she's really glad she called me. We figured this out. She's excited for the next move. This is a great time to ask for a review. And she didn't close for another like 5 months because of some situational things. But she still remembered me asking her to, write the review. And when we closed, she wrote an incredible review. So, in those very specific situations that all of us find ourselves in all the time, are situations that we can get people to tell the story for us so we can sell to that situation and overcome that objection in the future. Like the perfect example, I spent about 10 years of my career pissed every time someone would go buy new construction and there'd be some
Mm.
preferred lender deal. And I'm not talking about like the DR Horton like forward commitment deal at 2%, right? Like I'd take that deal if I was them. But like, paying closing costs or something, we can do that. Like, I mean, that's fine, but people don't know it, right? So I remember I made the decision, I'm going to stop being pissed off about this and I'm going to do something. So the next client I had that I knew was looking at new construction, I educated them, hey, we match, I promise, but I need you to do me a favor. Like when we close on this and we match that deal and we do the things that we said we are going to do, would you be willing to share a story that just says that we do exactly that? So people trust that this is how this works out. And it's you saying it, not me with sales breath.
Yes,
And the client was
exactly.
like, totally. So as you're going, that's not a past client strategy. That's a current client strategy, right? But when you're going into those conversations, think about how can I, maybe prompt them to say something that's more than just, we got a great rate or something like that, right? Like you want them to do that. So there was a question in the chat of how many times I follow up after the first time I ask. For me, I do 3 emails. And I think it's totally appropriate to add 1 or 2 calls to check in and make that a part of the conversation. So, and then there's a question about concessions and matching. If you're not in a position where you're like a P&L owner, talk to your branch manager and just say, what do these economics look like? Because I can't speak. I've learned enough about the different financial models that I can't give you the advice on that. But there's oftentimes a lot of flexibility in that. And for me, if there's a way to make it work, I want to ask the right people to figure out how to do that. So,
Well, and I will say, even if you get the written review, which I would push that as number one for Google. I mean, obviously you're getting on average inbound 3 leads, and they're good leads a week just from growing that presence online. So don't think that you couldn't possibly do this. Hopefully you guys are having your annual mortgage review calls. It could be during an annual review call, because that's something that I ask clients, what is your brand promise? Like, what is it that you're promising to people? Now I want you to think about prove it. Like, prove to me that you are who you say you are and you do what you say you'll do. And I should be able to see that in your social media. So Tuesdays are our brand promise days, where it's the evidence of whatever it is that we say we do. So if you say you help people build wealth through real estate, but there's nothing on your feed. In fact, your feed is only for those who are currently raising their hand, possibly interested in buying, then I'm going to call BS on that, because I want to see, are you just selling debt to people maximizing their DTI in a primary residence? That's not really helping people build wealth. But we heard a top producer say that at one time. So now we all take that value proposition and we all say it. And some of us know deep down, like, oh, but we don't actually live up to that. But some of us do. And if you're doing your annual reviews, I always record every single Zoom. It's, by the end of the conversation, you could then ask permission if you could cut up some of the key, nuggets from the call, but like, show how you've given a debt strategy. Like, it doesn't just have to be at closing. Like, we used to ask reviews for when we would give a credit strategy, like when we had to turn someone down and say, okay, it's not a no, it's just not a right now. We're going to build out a plan. We're
right.
going to guide you through this process. And oh, by the way, if you learned something from this call, do you mind making a social post and tagging us and letting us know? Because we're always trying to wow them with just knowledge, because knowledge is powerful when you're giving advice. Like, most people take the advice and they'll do based off the level of information or advice that they were given. So like, we know not all advice is great. And people who make better decisions, typically it came from places where they were given better information or better advice. So when you're so focused on wowing people to then earn the review, it's really not so bad to then ask for it. And especially when you set the tone up front, it's like, people just want to know, like, what is it you need from me? What is it you want? But you're going to earn it.
Mhm.
And I've been able to clearly articulate what I need on my end. So,
Yep. Service
okay,
is a
anything.
service is a scalable business. Being the price leader is not really a scalable business with great reputation. Um, even yeah, it's just, you can't afford to hire, you can't afford to deliver an amazing experience. But if you don't give people a different set of things to make a decision on, it's always going to come down to price. Like that's how I am with everything else that I buy. So why would it be any different for our clients? But you got to have something that you can I think you got to have something to point to that will tell that story rather than just being like, hey, trust me, I swear I'm really
Right.
good at this. Like that just,
Yeah.
it's not an effective strategy.
And I mean, I even see the post where, it's clearly a Canva template and, someone's written in the review and they post it. And I'm like, but is that real or did you just create? Like, who's Susan B? Is that a real person? Because that's what people are
Yeah.
thinking. They're like, let's be like, you're a salesperson. We know you get paid if I choose to get a home and do the loan with you. Like that's so how do I know? And this is kind of the dark side of marketers. And not only do we overdo it sometimes, but it could be borderline manipulation, because
Oh,
perception's
totally.
reality. And I hate that. And it's also made people skeptical as consumers. Like we now have all fallen for that bait and switch of like, take this pill and lose 20 pounds in 30 seconds. And you're like, add to cart. Like my TikTok cart, guys, is ridiculous. I think I have 19 things in there because they make it so easy. They like try on the clothes and I'm like, oh, that's cute. Add to cart. Add to cart. It's a problem. But for most, if they had done that and the experience wasn't good, it makes them a little skeptical. And,
Right.
knowing that millennials are the top demographic buying homes right now, I think people forget like millennials were high school age when the housing crash 08, 09
Yeah.
occurred, that they're not super trusting of one, not their parents' advice about finances, because maybe they lost a home or had to file bankruptcy, but also mortgage and real estate people. They may not have the best perception of you because they were kids living through that experience without really knowing what all was going on and what's changed. So millennials happen to be the most obsessed with like validation and social proof. I mean, it's so much to the
Hmm.
point where Facebook created a post update of like asking for a recommendation because we need the social validation from people. So it is definitely a superpower and can be your biggest competitive advantage, not only from a algorithm standpoint in SEO for when people go to Google and they're searching, which is that's more powerful than just paying for Facebook or meta ads, because people, when they go to
Right.
Google, they're looking for now. Like they're not just, researching. It's they need something now. Um, but it sounds like that's
Yep.
been your number one converter for you.
Oh, like by a lot. And it's a fun scoreboard. Like I don't report numbers anymore. I'm actually kind of a ghost. You can't figure out how much I produce. And I really love that because it's more about a scoreboard that I care about. I'll give you a quick story. I was speaking at a thing, Mastermind. You were there, right? Or was it
Yeah.
just Denise that was
Yep.
there? Yeah. So I
Wait, what did
spoke
you
and
just
Sean
say?
was there.
That- Were you like,
I
I don't
said,
know if
was
it
it
was you or your
Denise there or was
sister?
it you? Yeah,
Oh, the
you were in
story
the
of my
back of the
life.
room. Sorry. Yeah, whatever.
I'm just
Um,
kidding.
Sean was there speaking, and I didn't
Yes.
know Sean. But I wanted to hate him. Like everything in me, like the whole volume and unit. I wanted to hate Sean, but I met him, and I was like, he's actually really cool. I kind of like this guy. And then
Yeah.
I Googled him, and his online reputation is incredible. Like, not only does he do a ton of volume, but he does it well. And immediately I was like, this is a good operator. Like I
Yeah.
will listen to what this guy says. Um, so it's a way harder scoreboard to dominate, I think, than just throwing up a whole lot of volume in units. So some people are just
So,
lucky to have both.
yeah. Last question, because
Yeah.
it was something that I hear a lot of mortgage professionals struggle with, especially when you're focused on service. How do you let go of control and have your team handle things like you would? Because you are going to give a level 10 since you get the biggest piece of the pie of a commission. And someone may have the ability to do a 10, but they're only going to do a
Yeah.
7 because they get this much of the pie. There's
Yeah.
nothing worse than hiring maybe the wrong fit and it completely ruining everything you've built up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any tips on that from a letting go of control? And then how do you train, manage that process?
And that's its own 3-hour class.
Yeah.
So the thing I will tell you is first, there's probably people listening thinking nobody could ever do this as well as I can. And you may be right, you may not. But the reality is you can only do so much, and I think you're capable of doing a whole lot more. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you trust that you have the ability to pass on at least 80% or more of how you do things to someone else. So sometimes there's just a limiting belief for people where they don't think it's possible for other people to do great things. And I would challenge those folks to, think about, what do you want your life to look like 10 years from now? Because for me, like, I would have totally had burnout and got out of this business if I wouldn't have made a lot of serious adjustments to how I operate my business. This is the first thing. But the second thing is, I think a lot of people don't have their business in a way that it's like illustrated what the perfect loan process is, using Tim's language, and understanding what happens when and what's said. And here's another important thing to think about, is what happens front stage, like what clients are seeing, and what has to happen backstage to make that possible. Because
Mhm.
until you have total clarity on all of that, it's going to be a clusterfuck. Like, you're never going to
Mhm.
scale it and have someone else take over, because there's so much that up here of how you do things, that how could you ever expect someone else to know how to do those things if you don't have a really well documented process? So spend some time documenting your perfect loan process. It's going to be different than everyone else's. But once you document it, then you can start to carve out, like, okay, like, for example, the first thing I gave up was running online applications. I hated it. It sucked. I didn't want to do it ever again. So 16 years ago, the first thing I had my first teammate do, who's still with me, by the way, was run online applications. That's the first thing I taught him to do. And the only time I do it now is like if he's totally out of service. Otherwise, like, nights and weekends, he'll even hop in because he knows how much I hate doing it. Um, so just start carving out things one by one, and then you got to kind of be on people, right? Like, at Fairway, I've learned this term, being a foot tapper. If you've ever heard of the term being a foot tapper, but like, you're just always kind of foot tapping, ready to move, 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 move. That's the culture of Fairway. That's also the culture of how I run my team. Now, is it a great fit for everybody? No, it's definitely not a great fit for everybody. It drives some people crazy and they leave. But for the right fit people, they appreciate speed, moving quick, getting feedback. And they also know that when they're doing a great job, they're among other people who are doing a great job and they feel like they belong.
Mhm.
There's so much that you could say about that, but that's like probably the core handful of things that I would share to someone building a team. And just know, like, it's gonna be messy. Like, you got to be willing to be messy, because you were messy, like, to get to where you're at, like, the listener, not you, Deb, but
Oh,
anybody's messy,
100%.
right? Like, you
No.
gotta you gotta go through stuff to get good at stuff, and people have patience for that. Like, they have grace. You just have to own it when you fuck up. You got to apologize, and you got to maybe communicate how you're going to do it differently the next time. But as long as you do those things, like, people do not care. And that's the only way I think that it's possible to build like a true business where this is bigger than just an individual LO. And if building a team is important to you, those are probably some core things that you need to get your head wrapped around.
Well, this has been extremely helpful. Thank you for taking the hour today and being my special guest. For
Thanks for
those who
having me.
want to, yeah, for those who want to connect with you, kind of follow you, what's the best place
Yeah.
for them to reach out?
So on all social media, which is mostly just Instagram at this point, is Tyler Osby. So I'm putting it in the chat, but TylerOsby. It's a mix of like mortgage stuff and just personality. I'm also inside the Loan Atlas faculty. So like, if you're inside the Loan Atlas community, like, we're always really active in there. We do Q&A calls like this all the time. So I
I
have to
am
say,
a
like,
Loan
there's a
Atlas
lot of
member. Did you
really,
know that? I
I
signed up
didn't,
like the year in advance. I haven't attended as
badass.
many as I thought I would, but yes, it's super powerful.
I listen to stuff recorded all the time too, because there's just
Mhm.
so much content. But there's a lot of really giving faculty members that are super talented. I continue to learn from them. There's a lot of great communities out there. I do think the Loan Atlas is really pretty special, and Tim totally changed my life like 18 years ago with the Loan Toolbox. So being a part of this is it's really cool. It's a lot of fun. I can share that link again in case anybody missed it if you
Yes,
want.
yes, please do. And we'll
Okay.
make sure that it's also in the description on YouTube. And guys,
Oh,
for those
good.
of you who are listening on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and share this. Share this with someone that you know is in need of, a boost or some hope of things that they can control, especially as we're going through the holiday season. That's probably my favorite thing about
Yeah.
this fourth quarter is it's a great opportunity to reach out to people and just see how they are doing. And
I
so
had
if you
one
look at
thing
the
to add. I just
screen,
forgot. Yeah,
do
go
what?
ahead. I got one thing I'll add once you're done, but
Oh,
go ahead.
go ahead, and then we'll close out.
Well, here, I'll close this. Hopefully everybody's got what they need out of it. So this is a tough business. Like you get your face kicked in. It is not easy. And by the way, that never stops happening. Um, so, so if you're hopeful it will stop, it will not. You're just going to get a lot better at taking the punches. Okay. But the thing that I love about getting reviews, and if you feel like you're getting beat up right now, you'll feel this too, the amount of just being seen for what we do and feeling really appreciated. I've found no better way to get that experience than through reviews. So if you implement the strategies on that campaign that I shared, I guarantee you, if nothing else, like it'll get you deals. Like I know that for sure. But it'll also give you an element of like just appreciation for what we get to do and that people see what we do. Um, and for me as a team leader, like sometimes I think my team sometimes feels a little disconnected from the process. So I'll share reviews when they come in with my teammates. So if you have a processor or a funder or an underwriter, they get disconnected from the street experience of helping clients. Share those with those people because they feel like they're getting their butts kicked too. I just think that this is such a great opportunity of getting those reviews and getting you through what could be a hard season. I don't know. I mean, there's deals out there. You just got to do the work, but this is something that will really, really help.
And there's a lot of people who feel like they're working harder than they've ever worked and the results aren't coming yet. And they're beating themselves up and going into this like sales depression. So that's a great
Yeah.
point, even with your teammates, of sharing those reviews so that we can all see that, it's not going unnoticed and we are doing good. Even if it feels like, man, we're working our tails off and we're losing to contracts are getting canceled or they're going with the builder's lender. Like, what a great little file you could open up and remind yourself on a bad day that you're worthy, you're enough, and you just got to believe in yourself. So you guys, thank you for participating. Have a kick-ass
Yeah.
day. And who's going to win? Is it Jake Paul or Mike Tyson? What do you think?
I think Tyson's going to knock him out.
You think?
Yeah, I do. What do you think?
Okay,
You think
we
Jake
shall
Paul's going
see.
to do it?
I don't
I don't
know.
know.
But it's the whole, like, do
Seeing a
you
lot of,
go for the new young guy or the experienced guy? So I'm just ready to see.
I'm
Paul
just
said
excited they're
Tyson.
both getting paid. They're both getting paid a whole
Yeah,
lot of
true.
money. That's what's
Yes,
happening.
that's called marketing. All right, y'all
Yes, it
take
is.
care. Thank you,
All
Tyler.
right. See ya later.
Bye.